Is our world real? A question probably asked by many who have experienced a glitch in the Matrix. It's time to get comfortable and let the Matrix take control. Number 1. Back in 1987, I was sitting in a class and had the most intense and vivid daydream I have ever experienced. I was sitting in class looking at the clock, when the next thing I know, I am walking through a mall with a woman who I'd never met. Everything about the dream felt so real, so tangible. The smells, the tastes, the overall experience. I was an adult, and I knew that she was my girlfriend. As we were walking and talking, some guy started shooting people randomly, but before I had a chance to react, I felt something like a punch to my chest. When I looked down, I was standing over my own body, with a pool of blood spreading around it. I watched the chaos of the scene unfold in real time. My girlfriend was all over my body screaming, and I was trying to comfort her. I watched the police neutralize the shooter, and then the other emergency workers cleared the scene. I watched them remove my body, and I tried to follow, but I was unable to leave the mall. I haunted the mall for a few years. As a spirit, I was bored, so I would mess with the security guards during the night shift. During the business hours, I would try to interact with the customers. Every now and then, I could get someone to nod hello or walk around me and we wouldn't collide. I remember an elderly man sitting on one of the benches and having a heart attack. He was standing over his body, so I walked over to comfort him. I had an overwhelming feeling that it wasn't his time to die, and so I told him. He sank back into his body as the emergency workers were resuscitating him. One day I was sitting on one of the resting benches, and a young boy about the age of 6 or 7 sat down next to me. He began talking to me, and when he did, I felt something strange happen. I knew I was to leave with him. I became his invisible friend. His name was Brian. He was an only child of a single mother, and she was an abusive alcoholic. I helped him survive life. I taught him not to talk to others about me, so that they wouldn't think that he were crazy. I experienced being with Brian for years. When he was about 10 years old, his mother came home drunk. She went into a drunken rage and hit Brian, and I lost my temper, and I was able to slam her into the wall. She never hit him again. I watched him grow up into a teenager, and when he was around 18, I knew that my time with him had come to an end. We said our goodbyes, and just like that, the daydream was over. I looked up at the clock startled, and perhaps a minute had passed. I had experienced just short of 2 decades of existence as a ghost in a minute of time. Number 2. One day, I was walking to work, and all of a sudden I had an urge to walk a different path than usual. I work downtown in a big city. It was a strange spur-of-the-moment urge to walk a different way that changed my life forever. I turned into an alley that I had never seen before. As I remember it, I made it about 15 feet or so in, when an actual glitch happened. Everything in my mind scrambled. It felt as if I didn't have a body anymore, just that I was a semi-conscious entity floating through some weird dimension. all of a sudden in the array of different colours and shapes, a vision came to me. It was a bunch of strange-looking people that in my mind resembled businessmen in suits. They looked startled and panicked that I could see them. One of the people made a quick movement and everything turned to black. When I regained normality, I was on a completely different street. It was on the same street that I always used to walk to work. I felt sick and severely disturbed. I'd never done any hard drugs, never experienced any hallucinations, and have never had anything like this happen to me. The weird thing is, when the glitch was correcting itself, and I could see those people watching me like a caged animal, I had the feeling that I knew that I was being controlled. It still bothers me very much to this day. Number 3. I've always had those déjà vu dreams, where the events in your dream happen in real life, where it happens days or years later. Mine plays off this ordeal, except knowing what happened next saved my life. My dream was simple. I was driving down the mountains back home with friends in the car. What I vaguely remember is that we were on a snowboard/skiing trip. The conversation was the usual for the long car ride. I spy this and just stupid stuff. Then, Smash Mouth All-Star came on, and I remembered it because everyone started singing along. We were speeding down the mountains, and after signalling into the passing lane, all of a sudden, a huge car wreck happened right in front of us. It happened so fast that cars smashed into each other, and one of the cars involved rolled off the mountain over the divider. It was too close to avoid, so I pulled to the right, which caused the car behind us to plow into the side of us, rolling our car to the opposite side of the road. I remember just a fuzzy feeling, upside down, and just glancing around the car and seeing my friends mutilated. It sends shivers down my spine to even think about it. I wake up and I'm in tears. I was just so frightened and scared, it was surreal. This is where the glitch begins. After years passing from the night of the dream, my friends and I decided to get together to plan a small trip to have a ski and snowboard day for the first snowfall. We knew a storm was coming, so we headed up to the mountains. Good runs, fresh snow, and it was overall a great success. We had gotten exactly what we'd come for. We packed our things, headed down the mountain, and it clicked. The same stupid car banter. I Spy and then Smash Mouth. It all came on. It happened. I was in my nightmare. The wreck happened just as I remembered. But I didn't pull right as I did in the dream. I pulled left into the opposite lane, and somehow just avoided it. Everything slowed down. It was like as if I were in my own world, and everything happened the same except for my actions. We pulled to the side of the road and called 911. I broke down. It was too much. I was again scared and shaking, but somehow that stupid dream saved my life. Number 4. This happened when I was 11. I still remember it as if it were yesterday. My grandfather was getting old, and had been in and out of the hospital a few times that year. At the moment, he had been in the hospital for about 2 days. We had gone into the hospital to visit him, where I gave him a big hug and told him that I loved him and would see him tomorrow. That night, I went to bed and had the most beautiful dream. My grandpa came into my room and sat in the rocking chair in the corner. He invited me into his lap, and he told me he was going away for a while and that someday he would see me again. I shouldn't worry because everything was going to be okay, and he was no longer in any pain. I smiled at him and gave him a big hug and told him that I understood. I then looked over at my brother sleeping in the bunk below me and asked my grandpa if we should wake him and tell him. When I turned back to get a response from my grandpa, he was gone. I ran to the window to look out into the front yard, and he was there waving at me. He whispered, "Go tell your mum and dad exactly what I told you." I looked back at the door to my room, and then back to the front yard, and he was gone. I immediately woke up, ran to my parents' room, and turned on the light. I told them exactly what Grandpa had told me. They told me it was just a dream and to go back to bed, and I told them again exactly what Grandpa told me. Again, frustrated, it was 2 a.m, and they told me to go to bed so that we could speak about it in the morning. Just that moment, the phone rang. It was the hospital, and my mother started sobbing. Grandpa had just passed. At that moment, she just sat there with my father staring at me. I still remember their faces. They both looked at each other, then at me, then each other, and finally smiled and stopped crying. They gave me a big hug, told me that they loved me, and to go back to bed. They ended up going to the hospital that night, and my aunt came over to watch us. But we have never spoken about that night since. Number 5. When I was a teenager, I had 2 really intense dreams one night. The first one was about an online friend of mine calling me to say that she'd broken up with her boyfriend, and I sang a few lines of "Seals Don't Cry" over the phone. The second dream was finding a real-life friend's dead body floating in her bathtub. I didn't think anything of it until I logged online that evening, and the online friend came online to tell me that she'd broken up with her boyfriend that day. I immediately asked her if I could call her, and she said no. I remember thinking that if it meant something, it meant I could change it. Not long after, my phone rang, and it was my real-life friend from the dream calling me. I was completely freaked at this point, but I spoke to her as normal. She was just chatting to me about school and shit, until I realized I heard a splash in the background. I asked her, "Are you in the tub?" And when she said yes, I felt like my heart had stopped. I asked her, "What did you do?" She didn't answer me straight away, and then after a very long pause, she told me that she'd taken an entire bottle of pills and chased it with some mushrooms and vodka. She'd become scared waiting for it to hit her, so she called me so that she could hear someone's voice. I hung up and called 911. By the time they got there, she was unconscious but alive. Today, she's a mum to a beautiful little girl, and she's okay. Suicide is a horrific thing, and my deepest sympathies for anyone who's had the misfortune of being touched by it. Number 6. I had a very long dream. I was a vendor in a fish market. I remember getting up early, dressing, doing a whole morning routine, going to get tea, heading out to the docks, buying fish, loading them into a cart, and going to get ice, then haggling for ice, buying some less fresh fish whilst I was at it, then going to a market stall, setting up and selling fish all day. It was so real. I spoke to friends, smoked nasty cigarettes, haggled customers, ate lunch, had tea, and just lived through the day. At the end of the day, I cleaned up, counted my cash, paid the store rent, went home, cooked some of the fish that I hadn't sold, slinged it with some veggies and rice that I traded for. I drank more tea, relaxed for a while, and then drew a hot bath, soaked and smoked some more cigs, and then went to bed. The next morning I woke up refreshed, ready to go down to the docks to buy fresh catch. Except I was in my house, next to my wife, truck parked outside, and it was Saturday. My wife and I were getting geared up to go skiing in Oregon, and the car was already packed. Weird thing was, in the dream, I was single, and a smoker, which I'm not, and the whole long dream had been in fluent Chinese. The effortless kind of fluency that only comes from a lifetime of speaking it. Oh, and I had been Chinese. I'm a big hairy white dude, somewhat fluent in Spanish, and I know a little bit of Russian, but I've never. It's just weird. I've never worked in a fish market. I wonder who I was. And I wonder if some Chinese fish vendor woke up after having some dream about him being a big hairy white dude with a wife in a truck. Number 7. Me and my friend were at a Chinese restaurant. We ordered a General Tso chicken dinner and a shrimp lo mein dish. When we sat down, we took out both our boxes and set them on the table about 2 feet apart. My friend opens the first box, and we see a shrimp lo mein dish. It has all the things in there: noodles, shrimp, fried rice. He closes the box and opens the other box. Inside that box is another shrimp lo mein dish. Oh, I think they must have gotten our order mixed up. I was just about to say this when my friend out loud says, "Looks like they made a mistake and have given us 2. As he opens up the first box again, inside of it is a General Tso chicken dinner order. General Tso chicken, white rice, and an egg roll. He froze and looked at me. I looked back at him, and we sat in silence. It took us about 5 minutes or so to collect ourselves, and I have absolutely no idea what the hell happened. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I just saw The Matrix last week, so I was really keen to make this video. It really makes you think though, some of these stories. Are we real? Could we really live in a matrix? Perhaps I should just put my tinfoil hat away. If you enjoyed today's video, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to not miss your daily dose of horror. And there's also that magical bell button that you could press right next to subscribe to join an elite club. If you want to know what it's about, you'll need to press it to find out. Remember that you can submit your scary or paranormal story to my new official Reddit page, or send it over to my email, both of which can be found in the description. And feel free to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at The Mortis Media for sneak peeks into what goes on behind the scenes. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.